Good evening. I am being asked, when will the combat actions end, and is there a chance it will happen this year? Yes, friends, I believe the chance is very high, considering that the situation we are in is indeed quite difficult. Zelenskyy's visit to Kupiansk was very telling and, frankly, very bold. This visit demonstrated that Putin indeed often engages in disinformation. This strengthens our negotiating positions with Russia. But the fact that things are moving towards freezing the war is more than obvious. The Europeans really do not want this, but the pressure on Europe from the United States of America and the U.S. pressure on Ukraine is very intense. It is exerted on us in the following way, through limited resources. They don't have to say anything to us, but by specifically tightening the tap on weapons and ammunition supplies, it is very easy to achieve an end to this war. And, of course, a war of attrition sooner or later leads to a freeze. We have to understand this. Therefore, I emphasize again, this is not about capitulation. I have said this so many times, and I will repeat it. I am not tired of saying it again. The term capitulation is used by the vast majority of Europeans to agitate Ukrainians, to sow panic, and so on. There is no capitulation, and, pay attention, President Zelenskyy is talking about compromises. You will see more and more such statements as time goes on. Therefore, I would treat all the propaganda coming from the Ukrainian authorities very cautiously right now. It exists, and it is necessary, but I ask you to be as objective as possible and try to think critically. So, the chance that military actions will stop this year exists. Trump insists that this happens before Christmas. Count on it. By December 25th. Yes, the date is very close, and it seems completely unrealistic, considering that soon it will be 4 years of large-scale invasion, constant shelling, and you have no electricity, no district heating. I am also here without power, using autonomous lighting. But we talk about this practically every stream. This doesn't stop us from communicating, from supporting each other, but the reality is that in any case, resources are exhaustible. In Russia as well. Right now, both sides are moving towards a freeze, Russians included, and they are demanding greater advances for themselves. If Zelenskyy signs a capitulation, writes Yevhen Ostrovsky, I emphasize to Mr. Yevhen again, I wouldn't use the word capitulation in general. It is a very bad term because Ukraine is not disappearing. Ukraine remains. We have huge territorial problems, but capitulation is a bad word that needs to be completely removed from the Ukrainian lexicon right now. It sows disbelief. It sows panic. It seems to me they have pressured Zelenskyy. Yes, there will be hard times. Unfortunately, if the Europeans don't support us, it will be very hard for us. They will definitely support us, friends, for one simple reason. Mr. Dennis, I tell you, even after the freezing of the war, they need a clear understanding that Ukraine maintains a large army. I don't think it will be 800,000. We are talking about the personnel that might be in Ukraine. It will vary. They will maintain fewer, but decent financial support is needed. I regret that military financial support still hasn't been raised today. It remains at the level it was 3 years ago. Considering inflation and so on, considering that, well, we've already talked about this here, then huge sums are paid out for the fallen. In general, we need to switch to a contract-based system. Yes, that is the main version. They aren't solving this problem easily, but they are solving it in a completely different way. We decided against it, so that's how it is. Well, this is a decision, again, of the authorities. Next. Zelenskyy is bargaining for immunity for robbing the people of Ukraine, writes Serhiy Hispanitas. I respect your opinion, Mr. Serhiy, but this question really needs to be raised in courts. If we are saying that Zelenskyy is bargaining for immunity for robbing Ukraine, naturally, such questions will be raised after the war ends. Definitely, yes. There was even a report, I spoke about it literally yesterday on my channel, from the Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken, stating that Umarov met with U.S. intelligence officers where he allegedly might have spoken about this. But, again, naturally, there are no confirmations. However, contacts between Ukraine and the USA exist, and moreover, note this. Trump repeatedly insists on a revision, on an audit of military aid provided during Biden's time. He will do this, including for political motives, to find corrupt acts involving Democrats, yes, American Democrats, when they financed Ukraine before the war, so he can later show, look, they stole during the war. This will definitely happen. Whether they find such evidence is a secondary question. Question from Lilia Makota. Mr. Valerie, tell me, although you have already spoken somewhat about this, do you still believe that it will happen next year? Thank you. Yes, I believe so, because the intensity of the negotiation process is very high. Such intensity is unprecedented. I believe we have effectively returned to March of this year, likely implies 2022 contextually, or earlier in the cycle, when Trump was just starting to talk about ending the war in Ukraine. Recall that there was very serious pressure on Putin then. Yes, on Putin, I didn't misspoke, and Putin then started talking about negotiations in Istanbul, direct negotiations with Ukraine. I believe we behaved somewhat incorrectly when we started pushing for direct contact with Putin in Istanbul. Recall, Zelenskyy spoke about this. Kyslytsha even spoke about this. We walked away from negotiations then. Therefore, we really should have continued negotiations then, so that we would not return to the same point. On the battlefield, we haven't gained more achievements, just as Russia hasn't, so we are now trying to reach some kind of agreement. Consequently, yes, I believe the chances for freezing the war are very high. Whatever the case, even the Russians are interested in this. Zelenskyy also spoke about this. I mentioned this on the channel. Perhaps it didn't sound as vivid, but I want to draw attention to this, friends. He spoke about achieving a peace agreement in the context of a future prisoner of war exchange, which is already planned, agreed upon with the Russians, and is supposed to take place before the end of this year. Next question. Lilia Makota writes, for the sake of victory, one can squeeze out a smile from him. Does she mean Zelenskyy or Steve Witkoff? Well, both of them. But, friends, honestly, regarding the photo Zelenskyy published where he is sincerely smiling at Witkoff, and Witkoff at Zelenskyy, where they are embracing, most likely their relationship was like that. It's unlikely it was as bad as the press wrote. It's just that negotiations don't always go very smoothly. I mean that the parties often don't agree on a common denominator. But in any case, Zelenskyy has been taught. He has learned to be more diplomatic with negotiators, meaning with the other side too, with Europeans and Americans. After the truly not-so-successful conversation with Trump in the Oval Office at the end of February, I said back then that I didn't support Zelenskyy behaving that way with Trump. At the time, a large number of Ukrainians said, yes, okay. Yes, indeed, it gave Zelenskyy a chance to boost his ratings, but it in no way guaranteed that our relations with Trump became good. Trump remembers this to this day. Therefore, indeed, sometimes you have to squeeze out a smile. That is diplomacy. Next, Alexander Horvat. Good evening, Mr. Valeri. In your opinion, what are the chances Russia will agree to Trump's plan, or are they just stalling for time? They will agree. I have no doubt about this. They have time, just as we do. Time exists. Yes, obviously we are stalling the negotiation process. I mean the Ukrainian military political leadership. An expert on my channel talks about this a lot. Ivan Stupak, by the way, spoke about this a lot. Petro Oleszczuk in the summary program of the Center for Public Analytics, Veja, Tower. Indeed, such is the tactic of the Ukrainian side right now, but also the Russian side. So right now, effectively, the situation is at a stalemate. Both sides understand this, in Ukraine and in Russia. The shelling continues. We launch drones at them, they launch missiles at us, they hit us more. But they understand that we are used to it. We simply cannot be broken or bent, just like Zelenskyy. Therefore, Russia will indeed agree to compromise variants sooner or later. And right now, this story with the demilitarized zone, with the so-called referendum, it hasn't gone anywhere. Donald Trump said, "Okay, President Zelenskyy, you spoke about a referendum. Let's hold one. What are the questions? We will solve this now." It is no coincidence Peskov said that a ceasefire cannot be used by Ukraine as a respite. They understand this too. They are being pressured on this. And Ushakov said today, "We aren't accepting anything. It's just that a decision hasn't been made in Russia yet, but everyone understands that they are moving towards it. Definitely yes. The United States of America is currently almost an ally to Russia." Serhiy Kurov. Not an ally, but situational partners. The thing is, Russia sensed they could get a lot from the USA. Trump is promising them this. Xi Jinping really dislikes this. We have ongoing discussions on the channel with colleagues, specifically sinologists who are experts on these issues. There will be more of them. Is Russia really so dependent on China that it can no longer break free? In my opinion, Trump is challenging this position, so he is trying to pull Putin as close as possible to counterpose him against China. Because for the United States, China remains the enemy. This is written even in Donald Trump's new strategy, which the Europeans extremely dislike, because Trump threatens to withdraw troops from Europe. That will never happen, friends. He will never remove nuclear weapons from there. The contingent might be smaller. I have said repeatedly, it might be reduced to 76,000 troops. 76,000 American troops in Europe. This is the level, the volume of the contingent and numbers that existed before the start of the large-scale invasion in Europe. So, frankly speaking, a game is just being played right now. Everyone understands this. Next question. Cryogeny writes, "What if we hold a referendum in our part of Donbass? Our people are there, why should they be against Ukraine?" Well, yes, this can be done. But how to ensure it? The issue is that combat actions are ongoing there. Conducting a referendum right now is quite difficult, and generally the main issue of holding any plebiscite is definitely security. There are statements, which I regard as speculative, from the Election Commission, that they need half a year to prepare. Well, that's not exactly true. They can do it quickly, and they have updated voter lists regarding who is where. Excuse me, but after 4 years of large-scale invasion, everyone knows perfectly well. There is a database in the State Border Guard Service. Who left, who is abroad. You don't need to go to a fortune teller for this, excuse me. But another question is, what portion will vote? And right now this is being used as a political argument that, ostensibly, this cannot be done. But the fact that they are leaning towards it is indeed true. However, what will the referendum be about? Here again, the president speaks about either elections or a referendum, where questions might be raised about demilitarized, free economic zones. You probably remember the local elections, probably 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken, when Zelenskyy initiated an all-Ukrainian referendum during the elections with 5 questions about corruption, about life imprisonment for corruption, and there were some other questions. It all looked really comical because not everyone really wanted to vote in this referendum. I went, voted, and asked, "Can I vote twice?" They said, "Yes, vote twice." Yes, that happened. It was just, excuse me, some kind of nonsense. That is, it was conducted very non-transparently, in my opinion, this referendum, the results of which were not taken into account anywhere at all, because the questionnaires and ballots from this referendum were not counted by election commissions. They were lying around somewhere in the servant of the people HQs and so on. Nobody needed them. A referendum needs to be conducted quite systematically, quite seriously. The last referendum that was conducted quite systematically and seriously, but also with major violations, was the referendum back with Kuchma, when they talked about creating a bicameral parliament and so on. But that was ancient history. Currently, one could simply, as Zelenskyy is trying to do, in my opinion, shift the question and decision about the fate of the Donbass, which is still controlled by us, onto Ukrainians. I say still because we don't know what decision will be made by Zelenskyy based on the results of the negotiations. If it is a demilitarized zone, and the Americans propose that we withdraw troops from there, and Russian troops don't enter, indeed, the question is, who will control this? Because there is no answer to this question. Okay, next, good question. Andriy Amroziuk. Your opinion. In 2023 and half of 2024, Zelenskyy signed security guarantees with more than 20 countries, many with EU countries and G7 countries. So what were those guarantees? We talked about these bilateral agreements on security guarantees, but they are about cooperation in the field of security. It looks like there are no guarantees there, in not a single agreement, none at all. Zelenskyy mentioned them today and said that 32 countries in total signed similar agreements with Ukraine, even the United States of America. But friends, they are empty. They contain no security guarantees. Therefore, if the United States of America actually votes in the U.S. Congress for a bill that provides for giving Ukraine aid in the event of future aggression by Russia, according to NATO Article 5 standards, but only the Americans will do this, that will be a completely different story. And believe me, then the Russians will really reckon with the fact that we have such agreements with the USA. And supposedly, Trump hasn't spoken about this aloud yet, but he hints that they could provide such security guarantees to Ukraine. If Ukraine agrees to withdraw troops from the Donbass. Right now, Zelenskyy is trying to sell us the story that this will be a just peace. Indeed, well, not justice, I would say stable. Stability will be ensured precisely by such a treaty. Many of you rightfully compare it to the Budapest Memorandum. Indeed, such a threat exists. But if it carries a binding character and is passed in Congress, and then signed by the president, then all presidents will have to execute it. Not just Donald Trump, but subsequent ones too. And this would be a very good story. This is effectively the status of a U.S. partner with the rights of a NATO member. Such treaties have already been signed by the United States with very many countries. To some countries, they provide greater extensions under such treaties, like, for example, Israel, South Korea. To others, less. That exists. But it would be not bad for us in any case.